Thank you so much. I appreciate the Des Moines Register hosting this Soapbox, and thank you for coming out here in this sweltering weather. I might be last, but I guarantee I'm the hottest candidate that's here. And I'm delighted to tell you that I've been on the slingshot. So we've been here for 5 days and campaigning hard, loving Iowa, loving the state fair. So I'll brag on you from that standpoint. And my wife Susan is here, who we celebrated our wedding anniversary this last month, 50 years. And she was at home in Arkansas, and I was campaigning, and I called her up and said, I'm not going to be able to make it home. And of course, she's worried about me getting on the debate stage. And she said, Asa, don't worry about it. Don't come home until you get 40,000 donors and qualify for the debate stage. That's how committed she is. And let me tell you, those of you who are interested, we're going to be on the debate stage next Wednesday. And you mentioned civil discourse. I can't guarantee civil discourse in the debate, but it's something that we need to work toward. And whenever you look at the debate, we have to have 40,000 unique donors. We're at 38,000 plus, so we're almost there. We're going to get there. And I want to thank Iowa, all of you at the state fair that's helped us to marshal the donors to get on the debate stage. Let me talk about a few things for just a second. And first of all, I've talked to a lot of Iowans here. And there's so many things in common between Arkansas and Iowa. We're an agricultural economy. I grew up on a small farm. I was in 4-H. I understand cleaning out chicken houses. I understand hard work. We're also a state of small communities in which you value your small communities, and I prioritize those. I grew up in a town of 1,000 and then went to high school in Springdale, a little bit larger. But as governor, I wanted to make sure that when we improved education, we gave access to the rural schools as well and improved their education. And so I've been blessed in life, growing up on the farm, being able to engage as both governor, but in the most difficult crisis that our nation has faced. After 9/11, I served as Undersecretary at Homeland Security, setting up the largest government reorganization since the Pentagon was created. I was here in Iowa, here looking at the methamphetamine challenges when I was head of the DEA, and now we've moved on to the challenges of fentanyl. And I understand those, I understand how it impacts our community, and I know what needs to be done. And so as governor, let me just tell you a couple things before I go into where we need to go in our nation. First of all, as governor, I lowered taxes. We went from 7% state income tax rate down to 4.9%. That is $700 million a year that went from the government coffer back into the taxpayer's coffer. We trimmed the size of state government. When I became governor and when I left, we had 3,000 fewer state employees, a reduction of 14%, and guess what? We didn't fire anybody. We just did it more efficiently, we managed better, we saved the taxpayers money. We grew 100,000 jobs, and we also left my successor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, a $2 billion surplus. For a small state, that's not bad. And also, I know in Iowa you like women's sports. And let me tell you, my daughter is here who likes women's sports more now than when she did in high school. But I signed a law that protected women's sports. As governor, I signed a law that said biological men can't compete with women's sports. And so I had a conservative record as governor, but I look to the future of our country. And yes, I'm a Reagan conservative because I believe in a limited government. I believe in opportunity. I believe in managing, getting things done, and I believe in an optimistic future for our country. And so as president, what you tell me is that the economy is important. And so I recognize the challenges that we face in our economy. When you're looking at agricultural cost, then you're looking at inflation. And inflation was caused by excessive government spending that I even had to turn back as governor of Arkansas. Too much federal spending, too much debt that caused the inflation, and that hurts our families. And so you've got to start by controlling spending. I will do that and move toward a balanced budget in our country. I balance the budget as 8 years as governor of Arkansas, and we need to do that at the federal level. We're going to shrink the non-defense federal workforce by 10% and take a whack out of the administrative state. Whenever you look at the challenge that we have on the border, I was at the border when I was United States Attorney, a federal prosecutor prosecuting terrorist organizations in Arkansas. I went there, I looked at the border then, we started building infrastructure that carried on in the Trump administration, and we have to have a high regard for the rule of law in our country. And you cannot enter this country unless you try to do it under the law and the right way. And so we're going to adjust our asylum laws. We're going to put more resources for our border patrol. We're going to declare the cartels in Mexico foreign terrorist organizations. They're the ones that are causing the heartache, the human suffering that you see of those people trying to get into our country. And then you also see them bring in the fentanyl. When I was head of the DEA, I went to Mexico. I worked with President Vicente Fox, and we successfully went after the Arellano Felix cartel, and within a short amount of time, with our cooperation, Ben Amin Arellano Felix, head of the Tijuana cartel, was captured, and his brother Ramon was shot and killed. That's called cooperation. We need to get back and do that again if we're going to solve the problem along our border. Whenever you look at the challenges that we face as a nation, I've been a federal prosecutor, I've been head of the DEA. I believe in the rule of law in our country as a defining mark of our democracy. And when I see the smash and grab thefts in our retail stores, whether it's California or Chicago or wherever, I say is enough is enough. Let's enforce the law and let's stop this violent act. You do that by setting an example of the importance of our justice system and the rule of law. I propose reforms where needed to reform our federal law enforcement, to hold them more accountable. But we also have to make sure that we enforce the law in our streets and have a high regard for that in our democracy. And then whenever you look at the threats that we see abroad, we have to be able to lead in America. I do not want to turn leadership of Western world and our commerce over to China. I want to lead. I want the United States to lead. I want us to be strong against China, and we need to compete economically. We need to make sure that we support Taiwan. We need to make sure that we reinforce our bases in the Philippines. That's how you show strength. And yes, I believe, as Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, if America does not lead, the free world will not have a leader. That's important for our democracy. My wife and I spent some great years in a mobile home. We lived in a mobile home raising Sarah and our other children, and we went from a mobile home to the governor's mansion. Now, if you have a quiet moment and ask Susan where she was happiest, it would be close, right? We had happy days in the mobile home. Let me tell you, the highest compliment I've had campaigning anywhere in America was right here in Iowa. Because I went there, I told them I'm running for President of the United States. I asked them a few questions, they asked me a few questions. At the end, they looked at me and said, Asa, you're running for President of the United States, and you seem normal. You know, if anyone knows normal, Iowa knows normal. And let me tell you, we need normal leadership here in the United States that brings out the best of America, that brings out the best of our business, our private sector, brings out the best of our freedoms, and let's let the government stay out, reduce that regulations. Let's have a greater partnership with our states where we can have success here in Iowa. Thank you, and God bless you. Come on, do it. All right, we got time for questions. Yes, sir.
Governor, the 14th and 5th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution say no person shall be denied life, liberty, property, equal protection, or due process of law. As President of the United States, are you willing to immediately recognize the
Well, I recognize the importance of life in the womb, and that's why in Arkansas we have protected that, and I will continue to be a pro-life president. There was a question, another one. Yes, ma'am. You're talking about school violence? Oh, absolutely. The first responsibility of any government, or particularly school boards and the state, is to make sure our children are safe going to school. And so that's why I have led a national study on school safety. We've implemented those policies in Arkansas. We have made sure that our teachers, our law enforcement have every tool available to make sure our children are safe. And so absolutely, thank you for raising that. My wife Susan has been engaged in child abuse awareness and children's advocacy centers, protecting the children, and done a good job on that, but we need to extend that to our schools. Yes, ma'am. So the question was about food deserts and about children going hungry. And first of all, it is important that we have a safety net. That's why we have the SNAP program that was extended during the pandemic. And then we also, in Arkansas, have communities without good access to groceries, to food supply. Whenever you have a grocery store that leaves a community, that creates a food desert. And so we've supplemented those with making sure that we can have farmers markets there, improved access both in our schools and our communities. These are private sector decisions to a certain extent, but we need to make sure that we have that safety net in place. Yes, sir. The question was about our expatriates that live overseas that are Americans, but they don't have representation. I don't know whether they have I think they have a delegate vote at the Republican National Convention. I'm not 100% sure, but I like that idea. I've spoken to many of them. They serve America overseas, and God bless them. And so, you know, I hope that they have the right to vote. I want them to participate, and we need to reach out to them. Yes, ma'am. Or yes, right here. I'm sorry. The question is about Donald Trump. And first of all, I wish he would participate in the debate this week so we could really have a discussion of the issues and where our party and our country is going. But he's chosen not to do that and actually have a competing event. So tune into the debate this Wednesday, because you're going to have a serious policy discussion between the other candidates, and there's a lot of differences there. Differences in approach to Ukraine, differences in approach to China, differences in approach to, you know, our spending. So that's going to be an important date. Now, whenever you look at where we are going, I believe, after talking to Iowans all up and down here, that you're going to be the first state that moves away from Donald Trump. And you know, it's going to be a gradual process because it's sort of a default position. You know, I was for Trump in 2020 and 2016, and we've moved away. It's not the right leader for our future. And so it takes a little while for Iowans to figure out where they're going. And that's why that debate is important, is that you will help decide where you're going to go after you move away from Donald Trump. So it's going to change. It's going to start here in Iowa, and we're going to continue to make the case. I speak the truth. I just believe that our country will be better off with a leader that is focused on America, focused on others and service, and not simply a revenge tour. Yes. Great question. And first of all, as president, one of the first things that I will do is call the governors together with me and say, Democrats and Republicans, let's work together in solving the border crisis. The federal government and the state should not be separated. Secondly, when it comes to Mexico, there's some candidates that say we ought to use the military to drop bombs on the cartel or their labs that are there. You know, we ought to share intelligence, but if you do that, that's an invasion and attack on a foreign country who is an ally and a friend of the United States of America. That's not the right approach. And so I would use economic pressure to bring Mexico into greater partnership with us. President Obrador has not been consistent in going after the cartel. In fact, he's given them a green light, and we got to change their posture to cooperate with us just like they did when I was the DEA. Thank you for that question. All right, let's see. I don't know who I'm missing here. Way back in the back.
What's your approach to Ukraine?
Approach to Ukraine is that Russia invaded a sovereign territory, and the free people of Ukraine said, our freedom is worth fighting for. And so the United States of America should stand with those that are fighting for their freedom. We should not have our personnel there, but we should be supporting Ukraine in the defense of their own freedom. There's always limits. We've got to be careful, but my goodness, it's important for Ukraine to be strong in terms of their defense of Russia. I can't remember who's that right there, I believe. About Biden's. Oh, well, I mean, first of all, our sympathies and our prayers go out to the people of Hawaii, and to see them and their spirit coming together is absolutely inspiring. In terms of President Biden, I haven't looked at the nuances of it, but I have been at Homeland Security. FEMA was a part of that. We've responded to crisis. I've had to do that as governor. First of all, you need to be there. You need to be in Hawaii. You need to see it, and you need to bring the aid. You need to show the confidence. Hawaii is an important part of the United States of America. And so they ought to be there and give them every aid that's possible. Yes, sir. Great question. And so the answer is, the question was, you know, why should we give money to Ukraine when we have homeless people in the United States of America? And the answer is that we've got to do more than one thing. To put it in perspective, the last spending bill of President Biden was $1.2 trillion spending domestically. We've spent about $100 billion in aid to Ukraine. And so, you know, in perspective, we're spending a lot here in the United States of America. We need to take care of the homeless. We need to make sure that we have mental health services here. We need to do the border. We can do all of that. They're not mutually exclusive. I had a question right there, sir. You know, that's a good point if I heard it all right. The Second Amendment is important so that every individual in America can protect their home, can defend our freedoms, and can exercise their Second Amendment rights. I think that, and I don't know the nuance about Ukraine there, they seem to be doing a pretty good job of fighting for their own freedom. But I do believe that the United States having our rights enshrined in our Constitution is a blessing for America. You know, Israel right now, they don't have that written constitution. Others do not have that. And Russia has a written constitution, but it's meaningless. And so guess what? We have a written constitution, we have our rights, and we have the rule of law and the separation of powers that protects those God-given rights. Thank you all very much. Time is up. I'm going to be over at the pork tent. Feel free to come by there and see us. God bless you. Go to asa2024.com.